Okay, welcome back to another video in the COE training series. Thanks for keeping up with all of these. Hope you enjoyed the hour-long video of our last dynamics training focusing on the context area. The focus of this specific video will still remain within the dynamics environment, but we're going to be flipping gears to our events. So we're going to be looking at how we build out our engagement events, how we check in participants, as well as covering some of the event manager functionalities that we have within the backend. So our first step is going to be logging into Dynamics. So if you are in a live environment or in our testing environment, make sure that you're using one or the other. If you don't have those links, I'll share them in the description of the YouTube video. Just a general recommendation, if you're ever doing any testing, definitely recommend using UAT or the sandbox. If you're playing around, that way you're not messing with any live data, but if you are doing something for your production environment or the live environment, you can use that as well. So once you're logged into Dynamics, as you remember from the last video, we were primarily just in the events area or in the context area. But today we're going to be flipping gears to the events. So in the bottom left corner of our dynamic sitemap, we're going to select the dropdown and then select events. And this will bring us to a little bit of a different view. Again, reminder, what your initial view looks like might be different than mine, depending on whatever your personalization settings are. We covered this in the last video, but definitely want to make sure we cover it again. Personalization settings are really important, especially when it comes to events. So we're going to cover that again real quick, but if you did not watch the last video and need a reminder, up here in our upper right hand corner where we see our cogwheel is our settings tab. Click that and then we go to personalization settings, and this will open up another window, or a pop-up box I should say, for our personalization settings. It might take a second for me to load, refresh. Every time I'm in my full screen, it doesn't like it. It really doesn't like when I just don't click letters correctly. Okay, so in our personalization settings, the reason we call this out again for our events is specifically for the time zone. So make sure before you're ever creating an engagement in the events area that you have your correct time zone set. If it's not, that time zone will display on the portal. So if you're in Washington, but your time zone is set to Eastern time, your events are going to show up in Eastern time and be very confusing to your volunteers who are trying to register. Again, we also have the additional functionalities here for personalization of, if we want to set our default area to the events area, we can do that here. Set it to engagement so that every time we click home, it'll go to what we've got it set to. Once we're finished, click OK. Our screen should refresh like how mine is going now. And now those personalization settings are set. So the first thing we're going to do is just kind of go through this sitemap on the left-hand side. A little bit of different functionality, but definitely a lot of crossover to what we saw in the contacts area in our previous training. But up here, we've got our home button, which will bring us back to whatever home we set in our personalization setting. We still have our recents tab, so our most recent 10 entries. Our pin tab, so whatever records or areas of dynamics that we use often and what we've pinned them as. Under our workplace, we still have our dashboards and activities. Activities are just any notes or thank you emails that have been sent out for contacts. These typically have to do and are specific to engagement events. So thank you emails, this is where we can see them. We also see that in the email messages area on the contact section of Dynamics. So this is just another area that we can see it. Our engagements tab, this is where we'll find all of our events, both past events, current events, upcoming events that haven't been published yet. We'll come back to this and cover how to build these and navigate these here in a moment. Event locations, this has to do with any secondary location. We'll talk more specifically about this as we're building an engagement. Shift schedule, these are all of the shifts that are coming up or in a month for our program. So again, has to do with the engagements that we'll build here later this training. Our volunteers tab, this will bring us back to our all contacts. So whatever default contact view you have set, this will bring you back. Just a kind of a word of advice and training thing is volunteers in the event section is the exact same as the contacts in the contacts area. It's the same information, it's just worded differently and gives you two different areas that you can access contact information. Same thing with groups. These are all of our groups, both volunteer and competition team, all grouped together. Related tags, we covered this in our last training on contacts, but this is where we can see all of the related tags that are associated with an individual. We see the one we set in our last training for Molly Weasley. Under our volunteer registration, we've got one new feature that we didn't see in our last training that we covered related forms and related health forms, which is our qualifications. So these are all of the qualifications for individual contacts in the system. So their Class Bs and if they've completed them, etc. We really don't cover this much or use this much in the events area. This primarily is found within an individual contact. So we're really not going to focus too much on this specific functionality on this training. Same thing with related forms and related health forms. This really has to do with our individual contact data, and we're focused on how to build an event and look at our events. And then lastly, our reports training. We'll cover this in a later training with reports and dashboards. Okay, let's go into our engagements. Very similar to our contacts list view, we've got different views that we can look at from our events. I'm only looking at engagements that are in this year, or I only want to look at active engagements or things that have been published on the calendar, etc., etc. Your default will be active engagement opportunities. You may use this probably more often than any of the other drop downs here, but you can always use these for looking at events in a different visualization. So on our list view here, we've got the title, the status of it is, so closed means that the event has passed, so it's no longer taking place. This event happened in May of this year, so it's no longer taking registrations. That event is closed. A draft means that we're still working on it. It hasn't been published anywhere. A volunteer couldn't go in and actually register for the event whatsoever. It's still in Dynamics and hasn't gone anywhere. Published to the web, alternatively, is this event currently exists on the portal, and a volunteer could go in and register for the event and access it in its entirety. There's one other additional status here called privately published, which means that the event is live. It can be accessed from the portal, but a volunteer wouldn't necessarily see it on the portal. So we would give them a unique link to that event in order for them to register. Our type and subtype, we'll get into this as we create the event, but this is our, as the name suggests, the type of the event that we're building. Start date, what type of location it is, what the location is, filled shifts, and how many minimum and maximum number of volunteers or participants are eligible to participate. Region and program are also here as well. When clicking into an event or searching for an event, we've got our search box here, and I'm fat fingering clicking everything, so I apologize. For search bar, really wish I could get rid of this. There we go. We can search by the program, the engagement, opportunity title, name, subtype, and the type. So if I were looking for a local games, I could type in local and find an event by clicking into it. We're going to go through these in each detail, but opening up an event, we've got quite a few different tabs here for our summary tab. As the name suggests, gives us a summary of the engagement itself, the details of event, the who, what, where, when, why, how type information, location, where it's at, the schedule we'll get into in a few moments as we build a new engagement. But these are the shifts that somebody can register for. If this event had any associated sports, we see this especially with a competition engagement, what sports they're associated with, post settings, whether or not it is viewable on the portal or not. And we'll talk more about this as well. Our participants tab has to do with, well, the people that have registered for the event. Event managers, these are volunteers that have access to the engagement on the front end of the volunteer portal. Up here in our top bar, we've got the ability to obviously save and close, create a new one, clone an event. So a lot of our events in the Special Olympics are very cyclical. We do summer games every year. So recreating an event every single year is not the most desired process. So we can actually clone this event. And we'll get into how to clone here in a moment. Also have the ability to email participants. So initiating an email to everybody that is registered. Print a QR code so we can generate a unique QR code for the event. And scanning this will bring you to the engagement itself. Unlock address fields. We'll get to this as we're building the event. Deactivate will show as well. Publish, close, and cancel. And we'll get into each of these as we create an event. So to create a new event, we can either do it up here while we're inside an existing engagement, or more likely when we're back on our engagement tab here on the left sitemap, we go up and click Add New. A second here to take a drink of water. Okay. So when we first create a new event, as we were just looking at on an engagement, we're not seeing all of these tabs. We are simply at this point just creating a new draft for that event before we start adding all of the additional information that we need to. So we start with our program. So we add whatever program that we are a part of. This is an optional field, but if our event takes place in a specific region, we can indicate that here, either by typing in the region name or using our magnifying glass icon here and finding whatever region we have. For engagement title, this is, as the name suggests, whatever we want to call it. We're going to call this the, I don't know, the Quidditch Regional Finals. For location type, this is where we can indicate whether it's virtual, it's at a physical location, so it's an in-person event. Virtual, as like I said, if it's both or none at all. We're going to put on location, but here you can indicate whatever you want. For the type, we have the options of a competition event, a fundraising event, health event, leadership, and social. So if we're creating a competition event, it will give us some new options. But depending on whatever type of event yours is, you can indicate here. Further on, we have the option of adding a subtype. This is an open text box field, not an open text box field, but an open selection for whatever your program has configured for the type of event. So when we have competition selected, it gives us the option of invitation, local, regional, sectional, state, and UCS. These can be set to whatever you want, so long as your program administrator creates them in the configuration area, and we'll cover that in the next training. Similarly, if we click fundraising, we get different subtypes here as well. We're going to build a competition event just to show what that looks like. We're going to call this a state level. So one additional thing when it comes to a competition type event, we need to set who's eligible to register for this event. For a competition, you have the ability of opening it up to volunteer registrants. So volunteer registering for the summer games or our regional finals. But we also have the ability of opening up to athlete participation. So a coach could register their athletes for the same event. We do that up here in our right-hand corner where we see our drop-down caret. We click that, and then under competition type, we'll need to set it whether or not only athletes can register for the engagement, volunteers can only register for it, or both can register for it. So if it's open to just one or the other, you would indicate that here. But if it's open to everybody, they'll see it here. Big thing to call out here is that this selection will determine on what portal the engagement is visible on. So if it's only for athletes, that's only going to show up on the Circle of Care portal, the coach portal, and the athlete portal. For volunteers, that's only going to show up on the volunteer portal. And then for athletes and volunteers, it'll show up on everybody's portal, regardless of their login. So coming back to our summary box here, we've got our short description. We'll just set a very short description. Call out here is, when we're creating a draft, this might not be our final information. Everything that we're setting right now, we can come back and edit at a later date. This can be edited after we publish the event. Information changes, we can always come back and change it. Under our schedule settings box here, we can optionally set a date for it to be published to the portal. You don't have to do this right now. We'll show later on in this process how to just manually publish it. But this is a nice feature. Say you're coming in and setting up all of your events for the year, and you don't want volunteers necessarily to start registering for the event, but you want to set it up and have it out of sight, out of mind. You can establish a go publish date here, and on the 25th of October, this will publish to the portal without you having to do anything. Our multiple days toggle will indicate, if the event is over multiple days, then we indicate yes. If it's just a single day event, then it'll default to no. For start date and end date, we'll just indicate when the event happens, the time it will take place. Again, make sure that your personalization settings are set, because 10 a.m. Central Time is going to be different than 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Same thing with end date. One call out here is that you can't set the end date to something that's before the start date. It's got to be on or after the December 8th date that I just set. We'll see that if I set the end date to the same day, my multiple days toggle will automatically go back to no, and then automatically go to yes if I set it for another date. Same thing, set a end date time. This is going to be a 24-hour event. And then our has shifts toggle indicates whether or not there's different shifts that a volunteer or athlete can register for. So if this was no, there wouldn't be anything for a volunteer to register for. The use case here would be, we want to have an event in Dynamics for, a fundraiser or, an entry deadline for paperwork or something like that. There's no real registration process for it, but we want to have some acknowledgement. So you can indicate, it doesn't have any shifts if you'd like. So once we've got through this initial information, we'll click Save in our top sitemap bar. And now we can see all of those tabs that we were looking at earlier are now generated. There's no information in our summary tab because we haven't set anything and nobody is registered for it. So for right now, we're going to ignore this tab because there's nothing for us to look at. Let's start with our event details. Mention again, we can change the title here if we need to, change the program, region. Well, I should say, you won't change the program because you're only going to have access to your program. Event competition, or the competition event contact. This has to be a Dynamics user. So this couldn't be like a random volunteer or coach contact. This needs to be a staff member at Special Olympics who has access to Dynamics to be eligible here. On the front end, on the portal, whoever clicks this name, they'll get it'll populate an email to Mac Dugan. So whoever is on here will have the ability to be emailed by athletes and volunteers looking at the engagement. Same thing, there's an overall event contact. The difference between the two is, so we set this competition event for athlete and volunteers. Say there's a staff member that should be contacted for questions for the competition side of things, but a different staff member that needs to be contacted for volunteer questions. We can separate the two out for event contact and competition event contact. It can also be the same person if we need to, etc. Short description, we already went through this, but if we needed to edit it, we can edit it here. So for display on public calendar, we have the ability of displaying events on a public calendar, or what we call the anonymous view of a calendar. So this public calendar will, by indicating yes, will show up on that. If we indicate no, volunteers will still be able to find the event. They'll just need the portal URL to access it. So they'll still need to log into an account and sign up for the event. Under our detailed description box, this is where we can get a little bit more creative. Blah, blah, blah. This is a pretty wide text box, so we can add as much information here. We can add a website if we need to. We can bold everything, underline everything, highlight everything, turn it red, whatever we need to, we can do through here. So we've got additional functionalities here. If we needed to add a link, we could do that here. Same thing with inserting a table, do that here as well. For our additional details box, this is our parking details, what to bring, where to go, and if for our competition ratio details, so if we needed a 3-to-1 coach ratio, we can indicate that here. Big call out with this additional details box is if we don't enter in anything, these, what's the word for it? Titles or sections where we see parking details, what to bring, that information will still display on the portal with whatever the section title is. So if we don't have parking details, okay, but parking details is still going to show up. So if we don't know this information yet, we can say parking details will come later. Bring a smile. Go to the location and 4-to-1 coach ratio. I think I kind of covered this, but I'm going to go back. This is a unique volunteer URL. So this URL is also tied to our QR code functionality. So up here at the top of our bar where it says print QR code, we're able to generate and print a QR code. If we wanted to make this look a little bit prettier, we can copy it, put it into Photoshop or Canva or whatever we want. But whoever uses this QR code will be taken to this unique URL. So for ever posting on social media, we can take this URL from Dynamics. So we've completed pretty much all of our event details. Definitely recommend saving as we move on through each tab. Save earlier and often. That's always my mantra. So for our location information, when we first created this event, we indicated that this is going to be on location. So we're going to have a physical location that we're going to. Under location name, this is where we can indicate the title of the event. So say we are at Indiana University, and we can search in the search location through Bing Maps what the location is. So I'm going to look up Indiana University, and it's going to be at Indiana University Assembly Hall. It's going to be our location. So what we can see here is that Bing Locations did some work for us and added some additional information. The other alternative is we can type in an actual address for the event, and it will populate all of the information. So the search location functionality you can use in two ways. You can get some information filled out, or all of the information by putting the exact address in here. The important part that gets filled out is our latitude and longitude fields. So on the portal side of things, when somebody clicks that event location, that latitude and longitude is what is tied to the maps functionality. So if we want to give our volunteers and athletes a direct ping to where the event is, we can use the search location functionality. So in the event that our location, I'll use Indiana University as an example again. When I did Indiana University Assembly Hall, it's not giving me a street address. If I needed to unlock these and manually type those in, as we can see that they're locked right now, up here in our top sitemap bar, I've got the option of unlock address fields. By clicking that, it'll unlock it and allow me to type in whatever information I need. And then next time I click out of it, it'll lock back again, and I can keep doing that. For location contact, this is where we get a little bit of an additional freedom of identifying a volunteer or a coach that is going to be the primary contact for this location. So here we can indicate that Molly Weasley is our primary contact, and we know that at the location we should contact Molly for questions or direct other volunteers towards her. In our secondary locations box here, this is where we can set, as the name suggests, secondary locations. So take a summer games, for example. Summer games, while we might be at Indiana University, we may be at Assembly Hall, and also the swim arena and the basketball arena and the baseball fields. There's no one great location, but we are all at Indiana University. Through secondary locations, we have the ability of adding all of those other locations as part of Indiana University. So we can say the basketball arena, which also is just Assembly Hall. Shout out IU. Set an address if we have one. Zip code. These street information is optional. So all we really need is the name of the secondary location. It'll come pre-populated with the engagement opportunity, the program, and the region if we already have it set previously. But then we'll also need a short description. We can save and close this, or if we're adding multiple secondary locations, we can click our little drop-down caret down here at the bottom, click Save and Create New. As we can see here, that'll add that secondary location, and allow us to create another one. So we're also going to be at the baseball field. And then once we're done adding all of them, click Save and Close. Now we have 2 secondary locations. There's no minimum or maximum of secondary locations to add. You can just put however many secondary locations you have and you need. So under our schedule box here, or our schedule tab, this is arguably the most important. This is where we're going to build out all of our shifts for volunteers that allow them to register for the event. So under our first box here under schedule settings, some of this might not be visible depending on the type, the event type that you set. For competition events, we get a couple of extra options here for scratch date and end date, as well as single locations. But for the most part, our main functionality is going to be here in the volunteer schedule. So here we can change the event dates if we need to. We can indicate when registration will open, the time it'll open, and then how long they can register for. So they can register up until the 30th of November at 6 a.m. And they can scratch or unregister themselves by the 1st of December at 5:30 a.m. I think I did this a little bit backwards, but they have 1 day to scratch themselves. So that's the unregister aspect of what somebody can do on the portal. Reminder, a staff member can still remove participants, but this primarily has to do with what a portal user can do for unregistering themselves. Our close date happens, or is what sets the event closing altogether. So no longer is visible on the portal, no longer taking participation registrations, and will initiate all of the thank you emails post event. So, if we set this to the 9th of December, right after the event, actually it goes till the 10th. I'll set it to the 10th. On the 10th of December, the event will be removed from the portal, and anybody who has completed their shift will be sent that thank you email. So if you want this event to be displayed on the portal for the entire month of December, those emails won't go out until whatever close date you've set. Again, excuse me. Again, here's our shifts indicator. If we don't have shifts, it'll remove that. I won't be able to add anything for people to register for. But in our case, we do, so we can set that. Single registrations means that it only allows one person to register at a time. This will remove the ability for groups to register for. So if we don't want volunteer groups registering and only want individual volunteers, we would indicate yes for this. Our participants needed, we'll see that this is all locked. These will start populating as we create volunteer schedules. So we're going to ignore that for right now. Save real quick. So for our volunteer schedule, this is arguably the most important part of building our engagement. So a volunteer schedule has to do with a shift, or for a competition, a division that somebody can register for, a sport that they can register for, whatever that may be. We call those schedules, which is kind of the catch-all term. So to start adding them, we'll click Add New Engagement Opportunity Schedule. This will pop open a box on the right-hand side of our menu, and we'll start filling out all this information. Now, the first question we're asked is arguably the most important question of whether or not it's a primary schedule. 99.9% of the time, we're going to want to indicate yes. What yes does will display the schedule on the portal and allow people to actually register for it. Really the use case of a non-primary schedule would be for something like a board member attending a summer games. They're not really volunteering, they're just kind of attending, but we want to track their participation. We can set a non-primary schedule for that person or for that board member, and add them manually to it, but they won't be able to register on the portal necessarily. Additionally, a non-primary schedule won't count towards the overall number of volunteers that you need. Our participation type, this is going to be our role that we're looking for. So if we're looking for, just an event volunteer, this is where we set that here. So if we're looking for coaches to sign up for this, I forget what we've got it called here, assistant coach. But most of our events are going to be event volunteer. These participation types do need to exist in Dynamics in order to be added, but we can always use our search bar here or our advanced lookup to find all of our participation types that are relevant to us. So if we're not sure what it's called, we can go to the advanced find it here, and then select it. Then click done, and good to go. Coach participation type, this only is relevant for competition events. So this will determine what type of coach can register for their team for it. So if we wanted only assistant coaches to be able to register a team, we could do that as well. Competition type, this will determine who's eligible to register for the engagement, or for the shift, I should say. This shift is only for volunteers, or this shift is only for athletes, etc. Most of our events from a volunteer side are always just going to be volunteers only. Shift name is an open text box. We can call this whatever we want to. We'll call this Quidditch referees. This is, I think there's 500 maximum characters on this line, so you can really add a long description or add a long shift name if you want. Highly recommend you keep it pretty, simple. That way our volunteers are not confused at what the shift is, but we will have other opportunities to add more description in the long description here. Invitation code. So this is a unique code that we would be giving to a volunteer to enter in to find this specific shift. Use case would be here is, say you have a volunteer group or a corporate group volunteering, and you want to hold those 10 spots for them or whatever number it is. You can give them the invitation code of, I don't know, Plata. And them entering in that code, that shift will show up on their portal. So anybody with an invitation code will only see that shift. One note here is that the invitation code, it's not case sensitive. So I used a capital P, but I could use all lowercase on the portal and I'll still find it. Same thing with all uppercase. Doesn't matter. It's not case sensitive. Start date. This is the start date of the shift. So if you have multiple day event, and this shift is only going to be on the first day, this is where we can indicate it here. Call out here is obviously I can't add a shift that's not within the window of the event itself. So mine needs to be on December 8th and between the 8th and 9th. Mine's going to be a single day. And then same thing for the time. Can't start before the event starts and can't end after the event starts. Long description, this is where we'll add whatever description we have for the shift. Referee for Quidditch. You can type as much as you'd like in this long description. It's an open text box field, so feel free to get creative here. This has conflict toggle slider. This toggle will allow a volunteer to register for another shift that also starts at the same time. So say this volunteer is going to be there all day, but there's multiple shifts all day. The conflict toggle will allow them to do that. So if it is no, which is the default, and a volunteer tries to register for another shift that's also on December 8th, starting at 10 a.m., they won't be able to. If we indicate yes, they can sign up for multiple shifts that start at the same day at the same time. Primary preference has to do with our skills. This is an optional thing, has no requirements around it. Let's say a volunteer was looking for a shift that needed ASL skills. They could type in ASL on the portal and find this specific shift. For the minimum and maximum number of participants, this indicates how many people we need to have on the shift and how many we can allow to have on the shift. It has to have at least one person, and the maximum can be whatever we want. So we need one referee, and we can have a maximum of 50. So definitely a huge reminder and training piece is that it always has to be at least one person as part of a shift. For the event location, this is where we can indicate our secondary locations. So if this engagement is at, or this shift is at the baseball field, this is where we can indicate that. And then on the portal, they'll see the information just for the baseball field. If this doesn't take place at a secondary location, we don't have to put anything here, and it will default to our main location that we set earlier. Once we're done with this shift, or if we're adding multiple, we can click Save and Create New. But since for time's sake, we'll just save and close. And then we can add as many shifts as we want. So we can add any number of shifts as we need for the event across the entirety of the event itself. Add invitation codes, anything that we need. Moving on to our sports. This will really only come into play for a competition event, but we can add a type of sport for the event. So say that this Quidditch final, regional finals is a flag football event. We can add that here. We can add multiple sports. Say it's a summer games. We do flag football, cross-country skiing, and competitive cheer as part of this event. We can add as many sports as we need to. So for our post settings, this is where we can indicate when the engagement will be published on the portal. Call out here is while this date will automatically publish it for us, we do also have the ability of just manually publishing it to the portal. And to do that, up here in our top sitemap, under Publish, and we click our little drop down, we can either publish to the web immediately, publish on a certain date, just like where we see here, or publish it privately. So if we need this event to go out now and be on the portal, we can manually publish it immediately. For our three toggles here, public address, public city, and virtual engagement URL, recommend keeping these all yes, unless this information shouldn't be public. We don't want an address to be displayed or city to be displayed. We can say no to that. I can't think of too many use cases where you wouldn't. If you can, comment it below in the comments. Yeah. Our participants tab is where we can add our participants and check in our participants. So for the most part, these participants should be added from the portal. But from a staff perspective on the back end, we also have the ability of adding participants manually. So to do that process, we'll start down in our second box here for participants. We first need to add the volunteer to the event and then assign that volunteer to a shift. So we'll start with add new participation. It's already going to default to our event here, the engagement opportunity box, our contact, who we're going to add. One note here is that to add a contact manually from the back end, they do need to exist in Dynamics. So if this is somebody that has no record of ever being on the portal or in Dynamics, we will need to go through the process of creating a new contact, which we can do here. And that will go through the process of just adding the individual manually. If they do exist, you can type their name or search for them in the box here. We'll use Molly Weasley as an example. Click their name. If they are part of a volunteer group, we can add that. Forget what. Gryffindor Quidditch team. They're part of a volunteer group. If it's a single volunteer, you don't have to put a volunteer group here. But if they're part of a larger group, you can indicate that as well. Save and close to add the participant. And now this Molly Weasley has been added to the event, but hasn't necessarily been assigned a shift yet. So to assign Molly to a shift, we're going to go to the participation schedules area, click add new participation schedule. Our drop down here is individual or bulk. Bulk would be used for like registering a full group all at once. But for our case, for Molly, we're just going to look at registering her individually. For our schedule, we'll type in the shift that we just created. So we just created Quidditch referees. We're going to select that shift and find our participation. So our participant that we just added. In the event that we skipped our first step, we can actually just create a participant from this tab as well, and do the same process that we just saw on the participation section. But in our case, since we did the proper order of operations, we can select Molly Weasley. And then for her schedule status, we've got a few different options here. So pending is going to be that first level of status. So pending means that the event hasn't happened, they haven't shown up, they haven't completed their shift, they haven't no-showed, they haven't canceled, and they haven't scratched for it. It just means that they're pending arrival, pending completion. So for adding a participant manually in the back end, we'll start them at pending. The confirm override participation toggle, this is going to be a locked field until you click save and potentially have a volunteer that isn't qualified for the role. So earlier when we created our shift, we said this was for an event volunteer. If for some reason Molly Weasley was not eligible to be an event volunteer, we could still override that and have her do the Class B requirements on site when she gets there. So it allows us to kind of override the requirements associated with the specific role. Definitely recommend, we have our volunteers go through the portal and complete those requirements before they show up for the event, but definitely understand, the need to override that in some capacity. Once we're done, we can save and close, or if we're adding multiple, click our drop down and do save and create new, or we're just going to save and close. Now Molly has been added to a shift as well as the event, and we can see the overall status of pending. Now, say we're at the event and we're doing check-in, we can do our check-in processes from Dynamics or from the portal. In a second here, I'll cover the portal side of things with our event managers. But within Dynamics, we can check in Molly for her shift by clicking her checkbox here, and then it will populate with check-in up here. So once we're ready, click check-in, and it'll refresh, and now her status has been marked as complete. So she'll have all of her hours completed. She'll get an email thanking her for her participation on the close date. If we needed to edit this, oh shoot, I fat fingered, we can manually override that by going into her schedule and putting it back to pending and move her back to not checked in. Same thing, if we need to go back after the date and say, what, she didn't ever show up, we can indicate that as well, and she won't get any of those hours that she signed up for. The last piece is our event manager. So this is more of our front end process of checking in other volunteers. We covered this in the volunteer portal training, but we allow our volunteers to check in other volunteers through the event manager functionality. An event manager does need to be set by engagement per engagement. So any of our event managers will have to do that for every event. They don't get that across every single type of event. We'll add them here under the event managers tab. So if create a new one, do add new event manager. Again, these can be portal users. So we could add Molly Weasley as an event manager. She'll have access to this event, be able to check in other volunteers. I can also add myself. So the only requirement for an event manager is that they have a portal login and have access to the volunteer zone. Under our related tab, really all of the information that we need is already here, but we also have the option of looking at all of our participation schedules. This is another place where we can check in volunteers if we want, but it is the same functionality of the participation schedules that we see here. Looking through my list, this pretty much sums up our events section of the Dynamics backend. I'll go back to our summary tab real quick to show the timeline of emails that are getting generated. And we can see that as people are registering and we're adding shifts, this summary tab is also updating. So we can, as time goes on and people register, this information will continue to populate. But with that said, we're at the end of our training here. Thanks for sticking around for the 52 minutes. We will see you on our next training, in which we will cover configuration, so the setup of our programs in Dynamics. Thanks for watching. Take care.